She was 19 and crying quietly on a wooden bench outside a nearly abandoned train station. Rainwater dripped through the cracked roof above her head. Cold wind moved through the empty platform and carried the smell of rust, wet concrete, and old diesel smoke. Her backpack sat beside her feet. Everything she owned was inside it. 2 sweaters, a phone with a broken screen, and an envelope containing the last thing her family had left her. $8. That was her inheritance. $8 from a grandfather she barely understood. When the lawyer handed her the envelope 3 days earlier, he could not even meet her eyes for long. People in the office looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed for her. Some even thought it was cruel. After the funeral, her aunt whispered that her grandfather must have forgotten to update the paperwork before he died. But the lawyer had said something strange before she left. He wanted you to receive it personally, he said softly. And he specifically asked that you read the note only after arriving there. There, not home, not the city. There, inside the envelope was also a small brass key and the deed to an old roadside repair shop sitting beside a forgotten highway nearly 6 hours away. A building nobody wanted. A building everyone assumed was worthless. But what she did not know was her grandfather had spent 23 years hiding something inside that place. And before the week ended, she would discover why he left her exactly $8. Not 7, not 10, exactly 8. And the truth behind it would change her life forever. Before we continue, if stories like this make you slow down and feel something real, take a moment to subscribe. These stories are for anyone who has ever felt lost, forgotten, or one step away from giving up. And if you have ever inherited something emotional from someone you loved, comment below what it was. Sometimes the smallest things carry the biggest meaning. Her name was Clara Vale, and for most of her life, she believed her grandfather hated her father. Nobody ever explained it directly. It simply lived inside the silence of family dinners and unfinished sentences. Her grandfather, Walter Vale, rarely visited. When he did, he smelled like machine oil, cedarwood soap, and cigarette smoke carried in old denim jackets. He spoke slowly, carefully, like every word had to earn its place before leaving his mouth. Clara remembered being 6 years old and sitting beside him on a porch swing while cicadas screamed in the summer trees. He handed her a broken pocket watch once, not because it was valuable, because he wanted her to learn how things fit together. Everything talks, he told her quietly while placing tiny gears on a cloth towel. You just gotta learn how to listen. At the time, she did not understand. But years later, those words were returned to her inside the silence of that old repair shop. Her father never liked when Walter visited. The tension between them felt ancient, heavy, unfinished. Sometimes Clara heard arguments through thin apartment walls late at night. You wasted your whole life in that place. It fed us. It ruined Mom. You do not understand what it protected. That last sentence always stayed with her. What it protected. But nobody ever explained. Then one winter, Walter simply stopped visiting. No calls, no birthdays, nothing. And eventually Clara's father stopped mentioning him altogether. Years passed. Bills got worse. Her mother became sick. The apartment grew quieter. The smell of medicine slowly replaced the smell of cooking in their tiny kitchen. At 16, Clara started working evenings at a grocery store after school. By 17, she was helping pay rent. By 18, the hospital debt swallowed everything they had left. And 6 months later, both her parents were gone within the same year. Her mother first, then her father after a construction accident during heavy rain. After the funeral, relatives disappeared quickly. Sympathy faded. Phones stopped ringing. Clara spent months moving between cheap rooms and temporary couches, until eventually even those options disappeared, which was how she ended up crying alone at a train station, holding an $8 inheritance. The next morning, she boarded a bus heading north. Rain followed most of the journey. The farther she traveled, the emptier the roads became. Fields stretched endlessly beneath gray skies. Old barns leaned sideways in muddy grass. Telephone poles passed like lonely markers, counting down towards somewhere forgotten. She opened the envelope again, halfway through the trip. Inside was a note. The paper smelled faintly of dust and engine grease. Clara recognized the handwriting immediately. Small, precise, like her grandfather built sentences the same way he repaired engines. The note said, "Clara, if you are reading this, then I ran out of time. I know $8 feels cruel. It is not. You will understand when you open drawer number 8. Do not trust first impressions. And do not leave because of the noise." Walter, that was all. No explanation. No apology. Just more questions. Drawer number 8. Noise. What noise? Outside the bus window, thunder rolled across distant hills. Clara folded the note carefully and stared into the storm for the rest of the ride. She kept remembering small things about Walter she never noticed before. The way he counted screws before putting them away. The way he always paused when hearing unusual sounds. The way he repaired old radios nobody else wanted. He hated wasting things, even broken objects. People throw away things too early, he used to say. Maybe that included people too. By the time Clara arrived, evening had already settled over the highway. The repair shop stood alone near a dead gas station and an overgrown parking lot cracked by weeds. A faded sign barely hung above the entrance. Vale Auto and Machine Repair. One of the letters had fallen off years ago. The windows were dusty. The roof sagged slightly. Wind pushed loose metal somewhere behind the building with a slow, hollow, clanging sound. Clara stood silently beside the road, holding her backpack. This was it. This was what her grandfather left behind. At first glance, it looked worthless. The front door resisted when she unlocked it with a brass key. Dust drifted through pale evening light. Inside smelled like rust, motor oil, old paper, and rain trapped in wood for decades. Tools still hung neatly on walls. Drawers lined one entire workbench, each labeled carefully in faded handwriting. Bolts, washers, belts, spark plugs, everything organized, everything waiting, as if Walter had planned to return tomorrow. Clara walked slowly through the building. Her boots echoed softly across concrete floors. Then she heard it, a faint tapping sound, somewhere deeper inside the walls. She froze. The tapping stopped immediately. Silence returned. Outside, wind rattled dead branches against the roof. Clara swallowed hard. Do not leave because of the noise. The words from the note suddenly felt much heavier. She spent the first night sleeping inside the tiny office behind the garage. Rain hammered the roof for hours. Every strange sound kept her awake. Pipes creaked. Metal clicked. Something scratched softly beneath the floor once around midnight. At sunrise, she searched the building carefully. No animals. No broken pipes. Nothing obvious. But several things felt wrong. One wall inside the workshop sounded hollow when she knocked against it. The floor beneath the old hydraulic lift vibrated faintly at random moments. And drawer number 8 was locked, not rusted shut. Locked deliberately. Clara tried every key she found hanging around the shop. None worked. Frustration slowly replaced grief. Why leave riddles? Why not simply explain? That afternoon, an elderly man stopped outside the shop in a dusty pickup truck. He stared at the building for a long moment before stepping out. "You Walter's granddaughter?" he asked. Clara nodded cautiously. The man introduced himself as Leonard Brooks. He owned a farm several miles away. "Your grandfather fixed half this county's machinery," Leonard said, while looking around quietly. "Best mechanic I ever met." Clara asked him about the locked drawer. Something changed in Leonard's face immediately. Not fear exactly. More like recognition. He still kept that locked. "You know about it." Leonard hesitated. "Your grandfather believed some things should be earned slowly." That answer only deepened the mystery. Before leaving, Leonard handed her an old thermos filled with coffee and said something strange. "If the noise starts after midnight, listen carefully before you panic." Then he drove away. Clara watched his truck disappear into the gray horizon. The cold feeling in her stomach returned. Days passed. Clara cleaned the shop little by little. Dust covered everything. She found ancient receipts, faded photographs, broken watches, and jars filled with tiny metal parts carefully sorted by size. Her grandfather had kept everything. One evening, she discovered an old radio hidden beneath newspapers inside the office. When she plugged it in, static filled the room. Then suddenly music. Soft jazz crackled through the speaker. For a moment the shop felt alive again. She imagined Walter sitting at the workbench late at night repairing engines, while music drifted softly through oil-stained air. Then the tapping returned. 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 more. Clara followed the sound toward the workshop. It stopped near the back wall. She pressed her ear against cold concrete. Silence. But there was another sound now. A low humming vibration beneath the floor. Almost mechanical. The next morning she inspected the wall again. One section looked newer than the rest. Barely noticeable. Different concrete texture. Different paint shade. Why would someone patch only that section? Later that day, she found another note, hidden inside an old toolbox. Not addressed directly to her. Just a sentence written on folded paper. People only see what they expect to see. That night, she could not sleep. Rain dripped steadily outside. At nearly 2 in the morning, the humming returned louder than before. Then came a metallic clicking sound beneath the workshop floor. Clara grabbed a flashlight and stepped carefully into darkness. The beam moved across dusty shelves. Old tires, chains, tools. And then, she noticed a hydraulic lift had shifted slightly. Only an inch, but enough to expose something underneath. A narrow metal edge hidden in concrete, like concealed door. Her heart pounded violently. She crouched beside it. No handle, no visible lock. Just steel hidden beneath decades of dust. And scratched faintly into the surface were the numbers. 838. The inheritance. $8. Drawer 8. But what did 3 mean? The next day, Clara searched the shop obsessively for anything connected to the number 3. Hours passed. Nothing. Until she noticed something inside Walter's office. 3 clocks. All broken. But each stopped at exactly 8:03. A chill moved through her arms. She opened drawer after drawer searching for clues. Finally, hidden beneath accounting ledgers, she found a tiny brass winding key, the same shape as old clock keys. That night she waited. 3 p.m. came and went. Nothing happened. Midnight passed. Still nothing. Exhausted, Clara sat near the workshop wall listening to rain strike the roof. Then suddenly, click, a sharp metallic sound echoed beneath the floor. The humming returned, this time stronger. She looked at the wall clock. 3 a.m. Not night, morning. The sound had happened exactly 24 hours later. Hands shaking, Clara ran toward the hidden steel panel. Near the edge, she finally noticed a tiny opening barely visible beneath grime. She inserted the brass winding key. Turned once. Nothing. Turned again. Deep beneath the floor, gears moved slowly for the first time in years. The concrete trembled softly. Then the hidden panel lifted slightly, with a burst of stale, cold air rising from below. Clara stepped backward in shock. Under the shop was a staircase descending into darkness. The air below smelled ancient. Dry wood, metal, dust untouched for decades. Clara descended slowly, holding the flashlight tightly. The staircase led into a hidden underground room far larger than she expected. Shelves lined the walls. Wooden crates. Locked metal boxes. Old documents sealed carefully in wax paper. And in the center of the room stood a heavy work table beneath a single hanging lamp. On the table rested a leather journal. Her grandfather's journal. Beside it sat 8 silver dollars arranged neatly in a circle. Not paper bills. Coins. Each dated from different years. Clara picked one up carefully. Underneath the coins was another note. You finally listened. Tears filled her eyes instantly. She opened the journal. Inside were decades of entries. Not treasure maps. Not crime secrets. Something far more human. Walter had spent years restoring antique watches, engines, radios, and mechanical instruments for collectors across the country. Quietly, privately, many pieces became extremely valuable over time. But that was not the real secret. Hidden beneath canvas covers around the room were shelves filled with restored antiques worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Rare clocks, vintage motorcycles, handcrafted instruments, carefully preserved collectibles. Walter never sold most of them. He documented everything inside the journal. Every repair, every lesson, every mistake. And then Clara found a final entry written only weeks before his death. I failed many things in life, especially with my son. But Clara listens. She notices details. She stays when things become difficult. If she finds this room, then she earned it the same way I earned every tool in this shop. Slowly, Clara cried harder than she had at the funeral. Not because of the money, because for the first time in years she felt seen, loved, chosen. Then she discovered one final item hidden inside the desk drawer beneath the journal. A cassette tape labeled, "For Clara only." Hands trembling, she carried it upstairs to the old office. The tape player barely worked. Static crackled loudly. Then Walter's voice filled the room. Older, weak, but steady. "Clara, if you are hearing this, then you stayed long enough." She covered her mouth immediately. "I left you $8 because I needed you to understand something before finding the rest." A pause. When people think something has no value, they stop looking carefully. Soft static hummed. "You were treated that way too." Clara closed her eyes tightly. But hidden things survive because patient people protect them. Another pause. The shop was never the inheritance. His voice cracked slightly. "You were." The months that followed were not easy. Clara did not become instantly wealthy. Most of the antiques required documentation, restoration work, and legal processing before sale. Some collectors tried taking advantage of her. Others doubted her knowledge because of her age. But she kept Walter's journal beside her constantly. Every page taught her something. How to restore wood, how to repair clock springs, how to clean brass without damaging age marks. She made mistakes too. One watch mechanism shattered because she rushed. She cried afterward for nearly an hour. Then she remembered Walter's words. "Everything talks." So she slowed down. Leonard began helping occasionally. He taught her bookkeeping. A local woman named Irene brought warm meals twice a week after hearing Clara reopen the shop. Little by little, customers returned. Mostly old farmers at first, then collectors, then travelers curious about the strange little workshop beside the highway. Clara repaired radios, pocket watches, old tools people thought were beyond saving. And somehow repairing broken objects slowly repaired something inside her too. The shop changed gradually. Fresh paint, new lights, clean windows. But she kept most of the original signs exactly where Walter left them, especially drawer number 8. She never removed the lock. People asked about it constantly. She always smiled and answered the same way. Some things revealed themselves slowly. Years of grief no longer sat so heavily inside her chest. The loneliness softened, not disappeared completely, but softened. And for the first time since losing her parents, she stopped feeling abandoned by life. One quiet evening nearly a year later, Clara sat outside the repair shop watching sunset spread gold across the empty highway. Summer wind moved softly through tall grass nearby. Inside the shop, an old jazz record played quietly while tools clinked against wood. The same sounds her grandfather once listened to alone. Only now the place no longer felt lonely. A little girl visiting with her father stepped carefully into the shop, carrying a broken pocket watch. "It stopped working," she said nervously. Clara smiled gently. Then she remembered another porch, another summer, another old man placing tiny gears into her hands. She knelt beside the child and said softly, "Everything talks if you learn how to listen." And suddenly she understood. The inheritance was never about hidden money. It was about being trusted with something invisible. Patience, care, legacy, the belief that broken things still mattered. Clara looked toward the fading horizon where she had once arrived with nothing but $8 and grief heavy enough to drown her. Now the building glowed warmly behind her, alive again. So was she. And sometimes, the smallest inheritance changes everything. If this story touched you in any way, subscribe for more emotional mystery stories like this one. And in the comments, tell us about something small that carried huge meaning in your life. A letter, a tool, a photograph, a memory. Because sometimes the things people overlook become the things that save us.